So it has been a while since we have done a discussion type video. So today we are doing one and you're actually watching the same day that I'm filming it. It's about 9 a.m. right now. This video should go live at about 3:30. But to jump into it, since we have the dyno in 2 days, we need to do the pre-dyno checklist and start going over the car. So for those of you that haven't been on a dyno before, there's a lot of reasons why your car can get kicked off of the dyno. It could be leaking fluids, it could be smoking, could have an exhaust leak. There's a whole plethora of items that we're gonna cover right now, so that way if you're going to the dyno soon, kind of like I am, you're at least prepared for it, so that way you're not gonna get kicked out of there or turned away because your car is not 100% operational. So with that, let's start going over the list. So like I said, there are quite a few reasons why your car can get kicked out of the dyno. So we're just gonna go down the list. We'll start checking them off since we're going to the dyno here soon to make sure that my car is ready to hit the dyno and hopefully will not be turned away. But the first one on the list is going to be spark plugs. That should be pretty self-explanatory. Generally, if your plugs are over 5,000 miles old, you should probably swap them out. I would consult your tuner though, just to make sure to see if they want new plugs in the car and if they're comfortable tuning it with however many miles are on the plugs that you have in the car. So I've got some new spark plugs coming. They arrived today. I'm gonna go ahead and check that one off because I'm gonna be doing that one anyways. Next up is oil. So when it comes to the oil change, make sure you have at least less than 500 miles on the oil. They're really gonna be beating on the car when it goes onto the dyno. They're really gonna be revving it up, getting it tuned in perfectly for whatever modifications that you have done to the car. So make sure that oil is somewhat fresh. We did ours right before we put the intake manifold nose and everything else back on the car before we started it. So we are good there. Next one that is actually a little bit overlooked, especially when you go through and you do a lot of engine upgrades like we have over the past couple days, is that coolant. Make sure that your coolant is at least topped off and the car is fully burped to make sure that you have no air bubbles still trapped in the system. The last thing you want is air bubbles to be trapped in there as the car's on the dyno and they're really starting to get on it. You can end up with a failed head gasket and that will just lead to a whole lot of other problems when you're starting to get on the dyno. We have done that as well. Vacuum lines. I'm going to say this 3 times. Vacuum lines, vacuum lines, vacuum lines. Please make sure that your vacuum lines are routed correctly. They are fully seated onto whatever nipple they're going onto and that you have no vacuum leaks. You don't have to do a smoke test, but I highly recommend doing a smoke test just to make sure that you have no vacuum leaks. Because once you get down to the tuning shop, first of all, let me say this. You're going to the tuning shop to get your car tuned. You're not going down there to get your car worked on. So make sure that all the vacuum lines are secure and everything is hunky-dory in the engine bay, so that way when it gets down there, they can quickly run through the car and get it up on the dyno. I haven't done a smoke test yet, but when we did reassemble the engine, I did make sure every vacuum line was tight and zip tied up, so I'm going to go ahead and check that one off as well. So one that people don't think is a huge issue, but will result in your car having to be fixed when it gets to the shop is exhaust leaks. So they don't want to be putting the car on the dyno if you have a whole bunch of exhaust leaks going on. It's going to smell bad, it's going to make the car perform differently depending on where the exhaust leak is. So just make sure all those bolts are tight, you got some new gaskets in there and it's not leaking any exhaust out. No one wants that. So I swapped out every gasket on the car when we put the header on, the new up pipe, the down pipe, everything is fresh, clean, and ready to go. So all of our gaskets are good. One that will get you turned away, depending on what the issue is going to be fluid leaks. Whether that's oil, coolant, power steering fluid, brake fluid, doesn't matter what it is. Make sure that all of your fluids are staying where they're supposed to and they're not peeing out all over the engine bay, getting down on the splash guard. It can lead to bigger issues. Just make sure that if you do have any fluid leaks, you're getting that taken care of. Just fix it, all right? We have 20,000 miles on the car. The engine is pretty fresh, no leaks. Now, I kind of touched on this earlier. Make sure that all the lines in the car are secure, whether that's vacuum lines, fuel lines, PCV lines, and make sure that they're all secure and you don't have anything that's flying off. Even your intercooler piping, T-bolt clamps, make sure it's all tight, secure, not going anywhere, because that's the last thing you want. Get on the dyno, start blowing lines off, then you have to hunt them down. It's not fun, waste time. Waste your time and the tuner's time. I mean, it's coming out of your pocket because you're paying them, but they don't want to have to sift there and shuffle through the engine to find a lost vacuum line that just got blown off a nipple underneath the intake manifold or something. So just make sure you did zip tie all the lines, everything is tight, and that you're not going to have anything flying off when they start getting on the car. Now, it's not a huge huge one that we need to touch on here, but it still needs to be touched on. Filters. Make sure that all of your filters are at least clean or new. Whether that's intake air filter, if you have an inline fuel filter, whatever filters you got going on in the car, swing through them all. I mean, it'll take you a little bit extra time, but I promise you it will make a difference when you get down to the tuning shop. You're not wasting anyone's time, and you're actually able to just smoothly go through the pre-dyno inspection, because they're going to go through your car with a fine-tooth comb, and if there are any issues, they're going to let you know, and it's going to take longer to get the car tuned, or you might not even get tuned that day, depending on what the issue is. So just make sure all your filters are clean. They're pretty cheap to replace. If you want to replace them, suggest doing so. All right, last thing I have for like the engine aspect of things is make sure the car is mechanically sound. Swing through the car, fix anything that's wrong with it, fix those mechanically unsound issues so you don't have poo going everywhere. You don't want your engine to blow up. You don't want to waste anyone's time. Take the extra hour, go through the car, make sure it's mechanically sound. If you find any issues, go back through there and just correct them. Okay? Don't cheap out just because you want to get a tune. Please don't. I promise you, like for me, I'm driving 3.5 hours down to the tuner. I don't want to get down there and be turned away because of some stupid little issue in the engine bay. So we're good mechanically sound wise. We have test driven the car. Everything is good to go. Now, a couple other things for the engine aspect before we jump into the other stuff on the car. The other things, not a bad idea to do if you are feeling a little nervous, get a compression test on the car before you take it down to the dyno. Not required, you don't have to do it, but if you do have that weird nervous feeling in the back of your mind, compression test the car. It's not too bad to do. It's annoying, yes, but it's not terrible. And then lastly, smoke test if you are unsure about some of those vacuum lines as well. You can get smoke testers online on like Amazon. I think you can rent them at like local auto parts stores as well. Not a bad idea to do. Not required, not a bad idea. So let's get into the other aspects of pre-dyno inspection stuff. Now, personally, I feel like I don't need to say this one, but I need to say these ones. Transmission and rear differential. If it has been a very long time since you've changed out the fluid in the transmission or the rear diff, I do advise you swap that fluid out because they are going to be rolling through those gears as it gets on those rolling death wheels. Just swap it out. It's not too bad to do and it's not too expensive. There's more that goes into the dyno than just throwing some parts on the car, making sure that everything is hunky-dory up in the engine bay. You got to make sure the rest of the car is mechanically sound as well. So if your car is not engaging in gear fully because that old gear oil just doesn't want to do it, just swap it out. With that though, I mean, we did that. We used the Motul 75 weight 90, so we are good to go on that aspect. Sticking with the driveline stuff, I mean, I have it out of order here, but sticking with the driveline, make sure that your clutch isn't slipping before you're going to the dyno. The last thing you want is to get on the dyno, everything else to be good to go. They start getting on the car and the car won't hold power because the clutch just keeps slipping, whether because it's old or it's worn. So just make sure the clutch is not slipping. If it is slipping, either reschedule your dyno tune to a different day or bust out a new clutch real quick. It's up to you. Do what you want. We're good on that aspect. We still have the OEM clutch in the car. Just make sure your clutch is good. We are good there. Next, this is one that I know is often overlooked. Make sure you have an alignment. Your car needs to be able to drive straight to go on the dyno. So if you've never been on a dyno before, they're gonna pull your car up onto these rollers, either an in-ground dyno, a raised dyno, or they have those like dyno pack ones where they put them on the hubs of the wheels and then they lift your car up and they do it that way. Now, remember, if you're going on a rolling dyno with rollers in the ground, you're going to need to make sure that the car can drive straight because they're going to be tuning the car and trying to keep it straight on the rollers. If you have a car that just pulls left insanely or pulls right insanely, take it to an alignment shop, spend the $100 or $80, whatever it is for an alignment in your area, make sure the car drives straight. Your tuner will appreciate you and they won't kick you off the dyno. Another weird one that's often overlooked a little bit is tire pressure. Make sure that your car has the correct tire pressure in it. You don't want to go on there. It's a little one. Just make sure it's got the right tire pressure. 3 more things and we should be good to go for this dyno prep stuff, pending when my spark plugs get here. But next up is brakes. Make sure your car can stop also. Don't be going to your tuner with brakes that are like extremely worn out. They're going to turn you away more than likely. If they can't stop the car on the dyno, just make sure you got good brakes, all right? Self-explanatory, make sure your brakes work. Just make sure that you're knocking all these out, all right? It's an easy one. The last one I have for you guys is don't be like me. Make sure you clean out your car before going to the dyno also. I would suggest vacuuming it, wiping all the surfaces down as well. You're gonna have your tuner sitting inside of your car for a couple hours tuning the car. Be courteous to them, be nice to them. They're doing you a huge favor by just tuning the car. Yes, I know it's their job, but at least make the environment inside of the car a little bit more pleasant. Don't have crap everywhere in there. That's it for the dyno list. So just to recap going through here, engine stuff, spark plugs, if they're over 5,000 miles, I suggest changing them. Consult with your tuner though. Oil, if it has over 500 miles, swap that as well. Coolant, make sure it's burped fully. Make sure that you are topped off and you are good on coolant. You don't want your car overheating on the dyno. Vacuum lines, make sure they're all routed correctly. Make sure none of them are leaking and make sure they are all secure. Exhaust leaks, like I said, it's a simple one to do. It's annoying to fix sometimes depending on where the exhaust leak is, but make sure that you don't have any exhaust leaks. If you do, fix them real quick. Fluid leaks, make sure, like I said, brake fluid, power steering fluid, coolant, oil, everything up there. Make sure that none of it is leaking out of any surface. If it is, replace the gasket, replace the seal, replace whatever it is causing that leak to happen. Filters, not a huge one, but still one to touch on. Fuel filters, air intake filters, make sure they're at minimum clean. You don't have to go through and replace them all, just make sure they're at least clean. Make sure all your lines are secured. Like I said, fuel lines, vacuum lines, make sure they're either zip tied down, fully tightened, none of them are leaking. Not too bad to do. You should know what you pulled off when you were installing parts, so make sure that you just double check and go through there to make sure that they are all going to hold on. Wrapping it up for the engine stuff, remember, just make sure the car is overall mechanically sound to be tuned. They're going to be getting on the car, they're going to be at wide open throttle multiple times, so make sure the car is capable of handling it and nothing is going to happen to the engine. So as the owner of the car, it is your responsibility to make sure that you go through there and make sure that everything is tidy, neat, tucked away. Remember, you're going down there to get tuned, not to get your car fixed. Some of that other stuff that we talked about, trans diff fluid, if it is old, if it is grimy, if you haven't changed it out, or the car is having issues getting into gear because of that worn fluid, just make sure that you're swapping it out. It's not too bad to do. Make sure your alignment is straight, as we talked about, because you don't want it going all wonky and whatnot. You don't want to pull in left or right when it's on those rollers of death. If you haven't seen dyno fail compilations, I'm sure you can attribute some of those ones that came off of the dyno to, I mean, it not being strapped down properly, the car not having a full alignment and kind of veering off. But just make sure you get in alignment, and with that, just check your tire pressure. It's easy to do. Last couple ones, just to recap, make sure your brakes are good, make sure the car can stop. Be courteous to your tuners. Make sure you just clean out the inside of the car. You don't have to vacuum it. I do suggest it. It's nice to do. It takes 5 minutes. Just make sure it's clean for them to sit in. Make sure your clutch is not slipping prior to going to the dyno. If it happens on the dyno, it is what it is, but if it's happening before that, make sure that you get that corrected. And then lastly, make sure all the electrical is good on the car, because you don't want to go through there, have sensors flying around, wires hanging out, not secured to anything. So just make sure they're all cleaned up, all weather sealed, and all tucked away. All right, you guys, so all of this is pretty self-explanatory, but I did want to touch on this one because some of you guys did ask me, what do you need to make sure is all good to go prior to going to the dyno? So we are almost ready to hit the dyno. I'm going to be swapping out the spark plugs. I'm at like 5,600. The tuner said he was fine tuning with them, but for my peace of mind, I'm just going to swap them out. So it's not too bad to do. I can knock it out in about an hour. But for real, make sure that you guys go through the car and you have all of this stuff checked off. Like I said, you're going down to your tuner to get tuned. You're not trying to spend time in the shop fixing small issues on the car. Take an extra day, take a couple extra hours to go through there and make sure everything is secure, good to go. So that way, when you get down there, they can run through the pre-dyno inspection and get the car checked out and get it up on the dyno. But with that, quick video on just dyno prep. Dyno prep. Ooh, so I'm gonna end it there. If you guys like the video, you know what to do. Go ahead, hit that little thumbs up blue. Turn it up, turn it blue like the Subaru, behind me and whatnot. And if you guys enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll put it up here in this top, my right, your left corner today. And with that, I will catch you guys in the next one tomorrow, actually. So peace out, homies. Woo!